purpose of technology is to help us go further. That
T-minus 15 minutes. Mark, T-minus 15 minutes and counting.
You are sitting right in the core of the technology that is transforming the planet, transforming the economy. Industry, as you said before, across the landscape is going to be changed and has to move more quickly. Do you see industry moving quickly enough? And what is the message that you give to business leaders to try to help them understand what's possible?
I think that what I'm saying is that when you get the mobility as far as we get right now, you get the broadband as far out, you get cloud services. If you have that, then you need to start thinking about your industry. And then of course, the first step you make connectivity. You make devices being connected, cars being connected. And that's a great thing because you can get a lot of benefits. What I'm really working on right now is the next step. When you connect all those things to a system, how can you transform a system? Simple example as when one car is connected, that's great for the driver, you can get the information about the car, but when you connect all the cars, you can actually steer the traffic in a city, you can reduce CO2 emission, you can connect them to the parking meters, you know where it's a vacant space for parking, you can do things that you never thought about, and that's what I'm thinking about. How can you now connect these systems and actually make a benefit, and that's where I think we're going to be in 5 years from now. Right now we're connecting everything, and we're going to have 50 billion connected devices 2020 in our forecast. The next step is, what are you doing on all these connected things when you put them together?
Techonomy 2015 is a conference about the implications on society and business of all this technology that's transforming everything around us. We call it human values for a technologized age. We're going to talk about advances in the brain, the implications of virtual reality technology, what kind of things we're learning about the society going forward that are going to be completely changed as technology transforms literally everything.
The promise of technology is to help us go further. That promise has finally arrived.
Please say a command.
Take me home.
Introducing Sync 3, our next generation of voice-activated technology. Sync. Say the word.
T-minus 15 minutes. Mark, T-minus 15 minutes and counting.
I see the walls lost and see them fall. We break through them all.
You are sitting right in the core of the technology that is transforming the planet, transforming the economy. Industry, as you said before, across the landscape is going to be changed and has to move more quickly. Do you see industry moving quickly enough? And what is the message that you give to business leaders to try to help them understand what's possible?
I think that what I'm saying is that when you get the mobility as far as we get right now, you get the broadband as far out, you get cloud services. If you have that, then you need to start thinking about your industry. And then of course, the first step you make connectivity. You make devices being connected, cars being connected, and that's a great thing because you can get a lot of benefits. What I'm really working on right now is the next step. When you connect all those things to a system, how can you transform a system? Simple example as when one car is connected, that's great for the driver, you can get the information about the car, but when you connect all the cars, you can actually steer the traffic in a city, you can reduce CO2 emission, you can connect into the parking meters, you know where it's a vacant space for parking, you can do things that you never thought about, and that's what I'm thinking about. How can you now connect these systems and actually make a benefit? And that's where I think we're going to be in 5 years from now. Right now we're connecting everything, and we're going to have 50 billion connected devices 2020 in our forecast. The next step is, what are you doing on all these connected things when you put them together?
Techonomy 2015 is a conference about the implications on society and business of all this technology that's transforming everything around us. We call it human values for a technologized age. We're going to talk about advances in the brain, the implications of virtual reality technology, what kind of things we're learning about the society going forward that are going to be completely changed as technology transforms literally everything.
promise of technology is to help us go further. That promise has finally arrived.
Please say a command.
Take me home.
Introducing Sync 3, our next generation of voice-activated technology. Sync. Say the word.
T-minus 15 minutes. Mark, T-minus 15 minutes and counting.
I see the walls, then see them fall. We break through them all.
You are sitting right in the core of the technology that is transforming the planet, transforming the economy. Industry, as you said before, across the landscape is going to be changed and has to move more quickly. Do you see industry moving quickly enough? And what is the message that you give to business leaders to try to help them understand what's possible?
I think that what I'm saying is that when you get the mobility as far as we get right now, you get the broadband as far out, you get cloud services. If you have that, then you need to start about thinking about your industry. And then of course, the first step you make connectivity. You make devices being connected, cars being connected, and that's a great thing because you can get a lot of benefits. What I'm really working on right now is the next step. When you connect all those things to a system, how can you transform a system? Simple example as when one car is connected, that's great for the driver, you can get the information about the car, but when you connect all the cars, you can actually steer the traffic in a city, you can reduce CO2 emission, you can connect them to the parking meters, you know where it's a vacant space for parking, you can do things that you never thought about, and that's what I'm thinking about. How can you now connect these systems and actually make a benefit, and that's where I think we're going to be in 5 years from now. Right now we're connecting everything, and we're going to have 50 billion connected devices 2020 in our forecast. The next step is, what are you doing on all these connected things when you put them together?
Techonomy 2015 is a conference about the implications on society and business of all this technologies that's transforming everything around us. We call it human values for a technologized age. We're going to talk about advances in the brain, the implications of virtual reality technology, what kind of things we're learning about the society going forward that are going to be completely changed as technology transforms literally everything.
The promise of technology is to help us go further. That promise has finally arrived.
Please say a command.
Take me home.
Introducing Sync 3, our next generation of voice-activated technology. Sync. Say the word.
T-minus 15 minutes. Mark, T-minus 15 minutes and counting.
I see the walls walls, then see them fall. We break through them all.
You are sitting right in the core of the technology that is transforming the planet, transforming the economy. Industry, as you said before, across the landscape is going to be changed and has to move more quickly. Do you see industry moving quickly enough? And what is the message that you give to business leaders to try to help them understand what's possible?
I think that what I'm saying is that when you get the mobility as far as we get right now, you get the broadband as far out, you get cloud services. If you have that, then you need to start thinking about your industry. And then of course, the first step you make connectivity. You make devices being connected, cars being connected, and that's a great thing because you can get a lot of benefits. What I'm really working on right now is the next step. When you connect all those things to a system, how can you transform a system? Simple example as when one car is connected, that's great for the driver, you can get information about the car, but when you connect all the cars, you can actually steer the traffic in a city, you can reduce CO2 emission, you can connect into the parking meters, you know where it's a vacant space for parking, you can do things that you never thought about, and that's what I'm thinking about. How can you now connect these systems and actually make a benefit? And that's where I think we're going to be in 5 years from now. Right now we're connecting everything, and we're going to have 50 billion connected devices 2020 in our forecast. The next step is, what are you doing on all these connected things when you put them together?
Think less but see it grow. Like a ride, oh. Not easily offended, not hard to let it go. From a mess to the masses, a list of many, think less but see it grow. Like a ride, oh. Not easily offended, not hard to let it go. From a mess to the masses.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. We're about to begin.
Not easily offended, not hard to let it go. From a mess to the masses, a list of mania. Think less but see it grow. I like a ride, oh. Not easily offended, not hard to let it go. From a mess to the masses. This is showtime, this is showtime, this is showtime. This is showtime, this is showtime, this is showtime. Time to show it up, time to show it up, it's time to show it up. Time to show it up, time to show it up, it's time to show it up.
David Kirkpatrick is a technology journalist, author, and organizer of technology-oriented conferences. He is the author of The Facebook Effect, the inside story of the company that is connecting the world.
Hey, nobody even heard the Alexa thing. Anyway, hi. That was the Amazon Alexa, which we're going to use here and there throughout the program. I'm David Kirkpatrick. And so I'm just going to start by telling you a few things about why we're doing this conference. So I was walking along the cliffs this morning at dawn, and it was really beautiful, and I had a choice. I could either periscope the whole thing and say, oh, we're having a conference at Half Moon Bay Ritz tonight, so you should know about it. Or I could just enjoy myself. If I was younger, I probably would have done something different, because obviously I just walked around. But so how do we reconcile our understanding of the power of technology with our fundamental values as people and our belief in what it means to be human? That's a question that we're really going to be wrestling with here for the next couple days. We're surrounded by technology, but too often it really deadens and alienates us. And for example, this is probably minor, but when I checked into my room here, there was a video fire on the TV screen in my room. And I'm thinking, is this what we want tech to be, like a simulacrum of the things we used to value? I don't think so. And I was at the Boston South Station not long ago, and like every 30 seconds, there's a recorded voice that goes, "Thank you for riding the MBTA." And it's like, okay, well, I was actually there to ride Amtrak, but it's just totally meaningless. And this stuff surrounds us. We're always being thanked by some computer for being the customer of some company, pre-recorded expressions of happiness or such. But then this sort of dehumanized stuff goes all the way to the story about the sexting at the Colorado high school. I don't know how many of you have seen that. The New York Times has been covering it the last couple days. This high school 90 miles south of Denver, where a very large percentage of the student body was sexting each other, of course led by the football team. But, and there's a statistic in one of the articles that 24% of American teenagers have sent sexual texts, of all American teenagers. And then at the same time, I wonder, are there new comforting realities that only tech could help us express? I don't know the answer. But these questions have to be asked, in my opinion. And that's the kind of question we want to ask here, and we want you to go away asking. And I think the key thing is we're in control as people. We have to remember that we're in control as people. Our judgments matter. We're not passive, and that's no matter whether we're individuals or corporations. We have to make judgments about what is right and what is wrong as we're entering this world of total tech infusion, which is what we are entering. And there are people who absolutely get it, like the people of Romania, I don't know, as author of a book about Facebook, I happen to notice, I don't know how many of you saw it, because I get all these updates about Facebook news, but in Romania, they had a small Facebook revolution a week and a half ago, and they got rid of the prime minister because 30 or 40,000 people went into the streets of Bucharest. That stuff is still happening. Another interesting thing that maybe some of you experienced, I have been here, so I didn't. Today, the New York Times distributed Google Cardboard with every single print copy of the paper, and the reason they did it was to accompany a multimedia story on the physical and the emotional experience of refugees. So now you can have a VR experience on the NewYorkTimes.com about what it's like to be a refugee, thanks to Google Cardboard, and I'm sure they'll use that forever after in their content. And it's just amazing the role of social media in this flood of refugees, and the role of Twitter and Facebook in that. I read a piece today about how the government of Norway has been tweeting that they don't want people to come anymore. And that's the way that you communicate with the refugees now, is on Twitter. So I don't know if that's good or bad, I'm just pointing it out. And I think in our country, we do have a massive failure to take advantage of technology in education and in healthcare. And then we have automation. That's something else where we'll hear quite a bit about off and on throughout the few days, I hope. Certainly James Menyika of McKinsey will talk about that tomorrow. What it's doing to employment and how the nature of work is going to change fundamentally with all this automation. And the conclusion that James has come to, and that's in a new report from McKinsey, is that the future of work is a much more subtle conjunction of computers and people, working together with them, finding ways to have software and AI emphasize the more enjoyable parts of our work, let us get rid of the tedious stuff, and do more satisfying things. But there's a lot of questions that I think are relevant. What percentage of profits should a company retain or pay to its executives or shareholders instead of employees at a time when there's more transparency? That's a question that companies are faced with. And another choice that companies are faced with is, what do they do with all the data that they now have access to about their customers and their employees, for that matter? Not only what they can observe on the internet, but also what they can increasingly gather through the Internet of Things, as they can observe what's happening around their customers, which is the kind of thing that Mark Benioff and Adam Bosworth will talk about in our closing session. And I think it's very cool, but it raises massive privacy questions, and companies have to bear the responsibility for making the right decisions, and the right decisions are not clear. And another one similarly is, how far should countries go in surveilling their citizens? And it's a question that many countries are facing. And do we have an obligation to offer everybody a free, open, globally connected internet? Do countries have that obligation? And if you think the answer is yes, you should start wringing your hands, because more and more countries are in some way or another shutting off access to the global internet. And I, along with Nicholas Negroponte, who's been really out there talking about this, very much believe that internet access should be considered a human right. And I think that matters, and I think that we need more discussion of that sort of thing. And yet, so there's a lot of things I worry about. But I wanted to wave around our magazine, which we're very proud of. And one of the reasons I wanted to wave it around at this point in time is to point out that we've got a bunch of articles in here about incredible things that technology can do. We've got this piece about genomic medicine is here, and it works, but we just don't have a system that really can take advantage of it. And we've got a piece here that I wrote about technologized agriculture, which is a topic we'll explore tomorrow, and how much of a difference that could make. And then we have another really interesting one about the blockchain and whether or not that could be the means by which Hernando de Soto's long-standing desire to help poor people around the world get title to the things they own, whether it's their home or their horse or their cows, that problem might finally be remedied with the blockchain, he thinks, which is a pretty amazing idea. So those are fantastic things that technology is going to make possible. And I better wrap it up, or Simone's going to tell me that I'm going way too long. I guess I just had one more point, which was, thankfully, that I think it's astonishing and it's pertinent to this issue of values, that the presidential candidates in both parties are not talking about any of this. You would not know we are living in a digital society or an increasingly digital society if you watched the presidential debates. I think that's a scandal, and I think that's an issue of values, among other things. So anyway, so that's all I wanted to say to get started. And I wanted to bring up my colleague, Josh Campbell, to talk about some other cool stuff.
Thanks, David. So before we start the program, I just wanted to take a quick minute. Ooh, Alexa.
That was John Lennon. I was having it play John Lennon before.
Take a minute to thank our partners. You know, we're lucky enough to work with an amazing group of companies who really support our mission about talking about and elevating the conversation about how technology is impacting business and society. If you ever forget who they are on the back of your program. But to call them out, it's Accenture Digital, Ericsson, Visa, Ford, our knowledge partner, McKinsey, Edelman, Magisto, Omidyar Network, and the company that made all of our beautiful seating possible, Steelcase. I also encourage you at this point, if you haven't already, to download our app. It's available both in the Play Store and in the Apple iTunes Store if you search for Techonomy. In that, it gives you access to the participants, the agenda, and there's also a button on there called Fun at TE15. So that'll list a couple of activities that you could do while you're here. The first one is there's a bunch of Ford cars out near the entrance to the facility. If you take a test drive in one of the Ford cars or do a Sync 3 demo, Ford will donate $100 to code.org for everyone who does it. So I encourage everyone during your breaks, during lunch, to take a test drive or do the Ford demo. Additionally, one of our partners, Magisto, is providing everyone with free pro trial. Magisto is an amazing company. Download the app. It'll allow you to actually create video content from Techonomy with our branding to be able to share out to the broader community.
And it edits the video for you.
Yeah, using
AI
machine learning, it's actually doing the editing in real time. So we appreciate, you know, all of our partner support, all of your support, and I look forward to spending time with you over the next 2 days.
Thank you, Josh, for all your hard work making all that possible, too. So now, Simone Ross, the head of programming for Techonomy, and my co-founder with the company. So come on out, Simone.
Hello, thank you. Yeah, you're in trouble. We're already running late, so I'm going to keep this very
She's most attuned
very
to that.
short. So I'm just going to tell everyone about a couple of changes to the program first. Dave Morgan has been delayed, so we've replaced him with a different type of Morgan on the incumbent session. Martin Morgan from the Daily Mail is going to take part in that. On Tuesday, there will be no view from the White House. But Jack Hidary will talk about his Moonshot initiative, which I'm pretty sure is not about his run for mayor of New York City, but is actually focused on solving the world's greatest challenges. So that's a couple of key changes to the program. We'll be kicking off very soon with our Fusion session. We've chosen 9 people, given them 90 seconds to talk about sort of what's top of mind, what's keeping them awake at night. And they have to stick to their 90 seconds. So we'll do a little bit of housekeeping from David, and then we'll get started.
Thanks, Simone. So we really believe this is a conversation. That's one of our core approaches to the whole thing we do here. So we're going to have questions throughout, and don't just limit yourself to questions if you're in a panel and they're taking audience response. We like comments as well as questions. We just like conversation. And there are going to be mic handlers in this room. Just raise your hand and they'll find you. One thing you should know is we take everything here, make it on the record. It's live streaming now, so if you don't want it to be known, you shouldn't say it here, but you should say it anyway, in my opinion. We like a lot of Twittering, and the hashtag is Techonomy15. The wireless internet is Ritz-Carlton Conference. The password is Techonomy2015, so you add a 20 to the hashtag without the hashtag. Please silence your cell phones. And did you say what Fusion is, or are you going to do that now? You're going to say what Fusion is, right?
No, we're going to get going.
Oh, did you explain it? Okay. Well, Fusion, we just asked a bunch of people to briefly talk, and we don't know what they're going to say, so we're just going to go right to that.
Hi, I'm Marco Annunziata with GE, and I want to tell you something that I'm very excited about, which is the fact that we are now on the cusp of a digital industrial revolution, which will change the economy, and it will bring greater opportunities, more and better jobs, and it will probably be the most powerful example of how technology can be a force for good at the service of all of us. Now, over the last several years, we've been told over and over again that digital innovation has no economic impact, which might well be why it's not in the presidential debates. And that if it does have an economic impact, it will be negative, higher unemployment, more income inequality. I'm seeing already something completely different, a convergence of digital and physical technologies which is turning industrial machines into intelligent, interconnected devices which have greater efficiency, which can boost the production of renewable energy and can reduce energy consumption overall and can increase productivity across industries. I see digital tools that augment the abilities of workers of all skill levels thanks to intuitive user interfaces. And all this is the industrial internet, and it's now being accelerated by the industrial app economy, which will set the development of these solutions on an exponential pace of growth. This is tremendously exciting. Over the next 10 years, as it scales, it will transform the way we work and add up to $15 trillion to the global economy, provided we manage the transition, which is going to be disruptive, by focusing on skills, cybersecurity, and openness. If we do that, we will reap enormous benefits, and over the next 10 years, we will rewrite the textbooks on the economy and on industrial innovation. Thanks.
Thank you, Marco. Brian Ford of MIT Media Lab, formerly the White House.
What if we could eliminate media paywalls? What if when I needed to send you money, I didn't have to ask, are you with Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Venmo, PayPal? Because when I asked if I can send you an email, I don't ask if you use Gmail or Hotmail. What if I could send you money as easy as I can send you an email? What if I could send you a concert ticket as easy as an email, but I know and you know for sure when you buy that ticket from me that you are the actual owner and I didn't sell that PDF to 10 other people? And what if government started to adopt this? What if government started to create car title and put property title onto the blockchain, and it made the transfer of those ownerships as easy as putting it from my wallet to your wallet? After all, Hernando de Soto in this article will talk about how you can unlock trillions of dollars of dead capital in the developing world by clearing up property title and possibly putting it on the blockchain. And then what if you could go a step further? And they said, well, that was neat. What if we start distributing social welfare on the blockchain? And millions or even billions of people started to have digital wallets, and they could start to receive financial services. And we'd stop using this term unbanked, because we don't call them the unlandlined, and instead we gave them financial services how they want to have financial services. Because all of a sudden, Silicon Valley startups would have access to cloud-like infrastructure, which reduces their need to invest in millions of dollars in infrastructure and instead just work on a product. And now they can have access to that bank-like infrastructure with the blockchain. I think these what ifs are things that we're starting to think about at the MIT Media Lab with the Digital Currency Initiative. Folks like Joey Ito have said this is one of the most important emerging technologies in the next decade. And Nicholas Negroponte, who David mentioned, has said this is one of the most important things you can work on. So if you want to work on these what ifs and help us get to the future right now, skip the morning bike ride yoga session at 7 a.m. and join us on the panel tomorrow morning where we'll talk about the future of finance.
Hi, looks like I'm live. Well, I'm going to actually add some extra color to what I think Marco talked about, because we're both from large industrial conglomerates, and I think we're both very, very passionate about the Internet of Things, and not just the Internet of Things in general, but the Internet of what I like to call things that matter, the things that will be able to tackle these large-scale problems that are going to end up having broad societal impact. And I couldn't be more delighted to be here, actually, for the next 2 days and enjoy talking about that some more with some of you. One thing in particular I'm very passionate about is shifting our thinking from problem solution, or problem management rather, to problem prevention. And there's plenty of examples, I think, that really illustrate why this is important. So, for example, we spend billions of dollars worldwide. Actually, in my home country, or my original home country, the UK, something in the region of $13 billion annually on treating type 2 diabetes alone, which is inherently a preventable disease. Another example that's very topical here in California, water. So we got a light sprinkle today, which probably won't even touch the sides on our reservoirs. But really, is it just about lack of rain? What about the infrastructure itself? How efficient is our water infrastructure in the United States? Well, the bad news is not so much. Researchers estimate that something in the region of 2 trillion gallons of drinking water are lost annually across the United States. And these are all the types of problems that if we shift to a more preventive way of thinking, we can have an impact on with the Internet of Things. Thanks.
Eileen. I just want to say also, we are going to, you could get up, please, Eileen, stand up. We're going to continue this after these people who are the official designees with anybody in the room who wants to throw out their own 90-second thought about what really matters right now. So be thinking about that. And Eileen, take it away.
Hi, thank you for having me here. So I do technology and media in very low-tech environments and high-conflict environments, such as Afghanistan. And to kind of set the context to something that's been on my mind a lot is a little bit about Afghanistan. It's a country where there are 1.2 million internet users in an overall population of 30 million. 800,000 to 900,000 of those users are on Facebook. So Facebook Zero is working in country fantastically well. But what's really interesting is that social media in the Afghan context, and what I suspect in other contexts like that, has come to mean something differently. And it's being shared and it's reaching populations in a really different way. In the West, we're talking a lot now about peer-to-peer mobile technology and mobile social networks, how WeChat, Snapchat, WhatsApp, all of these different networks are changing how we're connecting. And that has been happening in Afghanistan and in other contexts like it for some time through SMSs that are meant to be shared throughout a whole community, or through Bluetooth technology that shares what's online and what's offline throughout the country, despite that 1.2 million internet penetration. So these are really interesting questions, and they're even more relevant, I think, now. Because of the security situation, not just in the country where I work, but also throughout the Middle East. And what I'm talking about is with violent extremism and the extremely effective ways that groups like ISIS are using Twitter and peer-to-peer social networking, their own apps that not only share information, but also post to all of their followers Twitter feeds and social media feeds at the same time. So the things that I'm thinking about and that are, I think, of great concern are how do we create technology platforms and integrated media and social media strategies that not only are getting at these emerging social media users and getting them to pay attention to us, but to engage and become a part of the solution. And for all of the businesses here, how do we work together with you, with civil society, and with governments around the world to make this truly an integrated solution? Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jessie Hempel with Wired. I want to talk about empathy. It builds a lot on what David was talking about. So I've been thinking about how we use technology to deepen empathy. And mostly I've been seeing examples of where it's not working. So if you think about empathy, and most of you, I think, would easily define it as the ability to share your feelings and specifically to shift your point of view and see the world through other people's eyes. I think we have to start by understanding why this is critical. It's not just a feel-good, it's a must-have. It helps us to love, it helps us to learn, it helps us to communicate and to cooperate. It's fundamental to what a democracy is made of. Technology's promise is that it can help us to deepen and strengthen those ties, and it really does. David mentioned the cardboard VR that arrived in my Manhattan apartment this morning with my New York Times. This morning, I was in Manhattan with my cardboard VR. And I was standing in these experiences I could never have had before, in the eyes of these children I never would have met. I was seeing the world through their eyes. That's powerful stuff. But too often, I also see the ways that technology robs us of our ability to empathize. I teach a course at NYU, for example, where every year it feels harder for me to get the students to talk to each other about their work. It's as if they don't have a set of tools that would help them to engage face-to-face with their work. I see that as a problem. And then earlier this year, I wrote a story about a Facebook sabbatical I took, and I got more email from readers than I had ever gotten before, and they were all describing these awful psychological situations. They wanted an end to it. Now, I think Facebook is a great thing. I don't mean to criticize it, but we must figure out how to embrace the best uses of these tools. It's imperative. It's important. That's all I got.
Thanks, Jesse.
Hello. I have a question for you. Is there a more human experience than health? Did we get the right idea? Illness and wellness, these are humanity's oldest and most defining experiences. And today we know more about our health than ever before. And in just the last very few centuries, we've really gone from very little understanding, the four humors, to very deep understanding of the human genome. And plus, thanks to the inexorable force of Moore's law, the volume of knowledge has grown exponentially. An example, 1 million gigabytes. That's the amount of health-related data each person is expected to generate in their lifetime. Ladies and gentlemen, that's equivalent to 300 million books. So one would think that with all the information and technology and advances, that the United States would be the healthiest nation on earth. Not true. We rank at the very bottom of 11 developed countries in terms of access, efficiency, and most embarrassingly, health outcomes. And this isn't because we have a lack of drugs or services or education. And heaven knows the information to solve chronic preventable diseases like diabetes that was just mentioned. No, what's standing in our way is our inability to sift through all that information to deliver the right data in the right way to the right people in a meaningful way that'll make a difference in their lives. So what's the answer to this tangle of data and disease? It's simple. I believe communication is the cure. So we're gathered here today to talk about human values and technology and empathy, and my challenge to all of us is to consider how we can employ technology to humanize the health data sphere. And it's no exaggeration to say that it's a matter of life and death. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Garrett Nyman. I'm co-founder and CEO of College Spring, which is a nonprofit that'll help 50,000 inner city kids be academically prepared for college in the next 5 years. And every time I go into a low-income school in the Bay Area, I meet kids who still don't have a smartphone. I meet kids in New York City who their school doesn't have broadband internet. I even meet kids in South Los Angeles who are almost adults, have never been to the beach. And the thesis I'd like to share with you today is that technology and innovation without intentionality dramatically increases inequality in our world. And when we think about innovation, we think it democratizes. So Uber is everyone's private driver, or Khan Academy is free education for everyone. But very few of these products and services really are for everyone. That poor people are never going to be able to pay for a service like Uber. Uneducated folks are less likely to tap into educational technology and online resources and so forth. And what you have is an impact where technology widens gaps as opposed to closing them. But there is another way to do this, which is to partner with the big institutions that serve poor people and build those collaborations so that that partnership happens and they gain access to those services that otherwise were middle class and upper class services. So think Apple in terms of all the computers they brought to schools. Think of Facebook and the work they're doing now to democratize internet access. These are challenging, complicated partnerships. They might be a little bit less scalable and the kind of partnerships that entrepreneurs and venture capitalists sometimes try to avoid, but they're hugely important for having equitable progress in our society. Thank you.
There are three things that are very much on my mind at the moment. And these are the interrelated issues of privacy, cybersecurity, and press freedom, or freedom of expression, if you like. Now, in Britain, which I think we'd all agree is, has one of the most vibrant democracies in the world, we've seen the line between privacy, the protection of privacy, and the freedom to publish information in the public interest moving towards the favor of privacy. We have in our security forces powers ever increasing to monitor the activities of private individuals, of course, particularly in the digital arena, understandably to combat terrorism. As a global publisher of news and information, you know, we too have ever increasing quantities of highly sensitive personal information on our databases, driving us to increase our investment in our own cyber defenses. And for me as the CEO of a company, I think the challenge to balance these things is only increasing. And it's an issue, or issues that are very personal to me, because as a young man, I grew up in apartheid South Africa, and I lived in a society with very restricted freedom of the press and the freedom of expression and overbearing security forces. So these are very real issues, and I look forward to discussing them more with you during the next 2 days.
Hi, I'm Helen Wong from Teaming Ventures in Shanghai. For me, the potential of technology in China is really interesting because as economic growth is slowing down, a lot of traditional sectors are actually looking to embrace technology even more. And the traditional sectors in China are very inefficient. So for example, the retail sector, there are many layers of distribution. So making it e-commerce actually a more better customer experience and a more better way to access for customers. And I think for another trend that I'm very excited about is empowerment of the individual. For example, we recently invested in this one person who is an online celebrity. And he's able to give his views on WeChat and also develop his video content on Youku, which is like an equivalent of YouTube. And based on that, build a business selling books that he recommends on the internet platform. So I think that's a very important trend, this empowerment of the individual. And on the perils of technology, I would say that in China, there are a lot of people who use it to spread false rumors, for example, to manipulate the stock market or to attack their competitors. So that is, unfortunately, a negative thing that it makes it harder to filter out the truth in China. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. And you know, it's interesting to me how many of those comments tied into things I was saying at the beginning. Kind of amazing, because we really didn't script. All we did was pick the people. We said, say what you want to say. We've got a few more minutes, since I went on a little long at the beginning, maybe not as much as we would have had. But anybody who has a comment about their own feeling about how we ought to think about technology and values, or anything else that maybe has been stimulated by what they've heard so far? Michael, can we get the mic over to Michael? Do we have a mic handler here? Okay, good.
Well, part of what I want to hear is
Michael Miller,
Ziff Brothers and PC Magazine, is why, you know, for years technology has driven increases in productivity. The last few years, that seems to have stopped, and the question is, what's happened to productivity? We've got all the entrepreneurs here say we're reinventing things. GE, $15 trillion of increased benefits. Doesn't show up in any of the statistics, and I'm curious if anybody has any good ideas why.
You want to say anything about that, Marco? Can you grab that mic again? I mean, you might as well, right? He's the guy to ask. He's the economist for GE.
So already the first time that we had an internet revolution in the 80s and 90s, people said, we've had computers for 10 years, where is the productivity? It takes time. Over the last few years, we've had very little investment. So the innovation we're seeing have not scaled through industry yet. It's going to take a few more years of investment for these things to really be introduced in companies, in factories, and also for industries to change the way they operate and be able to really exploit these new technologies. We have to change the way we work for this thing to really take effect. So don't look at the numbers today and be fooled in thinking the potential is not there. Just focus on what we need to do to make it work. Because when you look at individual applications, you see at the micro level 5%, 10%, 20% improvements in efficiency. So the trick is how do we scale them as quickly as possible?
Thanks very much, Marco. Okay, back here. Identify yourself, please.
Mark Bonchek with Shift Thinking. So the thing that I keep focusing on is that we just have an instinct to go straight into what to do about all of this. And that we don't take enough time to stop and say, how do we think about all of this? And that what's happening is the pace of change is such that we used to be able to wait for the next generation. You know, if anyone knows Thomas Kuhn's work on scientific revolution and paradigms, you could just wait for the next generation to adopt the new mental models. And the pace of change means that we can't wait for the next generation. And I think this is the first generation that has to update our thinking in the middle of our careers, in the middle of our lifespans as organizations. And I don't think we have the approaches on how to update our thinking, to unlearn as well as learn. And so the thing that we heard a lot of these talks already are saying we have to shift our thinking. We have to develop new ways of thinking. How do we do that? Because our educational system is about learning, not unlearning.
I'm really glad you said that, Mark, and I think that's going to come up frequently throughout the next 2 days, although I have to say I think it's shocking, again, how little that recognition of that need is discussed. And I hope that maybe after you leave here, you'll feel a little more passionate about that. Where are you pointing, Alex? Oh, there, please.
Hi, I'm David Rowan, editor of British Wired.
Hey, good to have you.
And Helen made me think, this is a great California-based audience. I know people have traveled, but I was in China last week. I spent a week talking to about 20 startups. And I think we need to rethink China, not as the place stealing ideas from the West, but now it's innovating and the West should be learning from it. I'll give you very quickly 3 examples. WeChat, 700 and something million active monthly users. You can now do everything from book a medical appointment to book a flight inside the app. I've just done a story about Facebook Messenger, which is now trying to do a very similar thing as a platform for all businesses. Xiaomi, one of the biggest tech companies in the world, 45 billion valuation. We think of it as a very, very low-cost smartphone company. In fact, they are trying to be an ecosystem, and they are, rather than producing ancillary products themselves, investing in about 60 companies, startups, because they've realized the startups can move more quickly than they can. And that's how they see their future. And the third thing is, the phrase I kept hearing in these startups is, we're a 996 company. And I said, what does that mean? You know, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. So whether we think that's a quality of work life that we want here, that's what we're up against.
You mean 90 hours?
9 a.m. to 9 p.m.
9 a.m. to,
6 days a week.
Ooh, is that more than 90 hours? Anyway, that's a lot of hours. I'm glad you said that. And by the way, in the article about agriculture that I wrote and spent a lot of time reporting in this magazine that we're giving all you, it says China almost certainly will leapfrog everybody else in this area. They're already investing massively, mostly secretly in it. And Drew Purvis and I were just talking about this, wherever Drew is, earlier, about we both believe China is going to lead in many of these technologies. So who wants to say something else? Please.
Terry Stanovsky, Salk Institute. So education was mentioned. I think that everyone here welcomes the great speed and acceleration with which technology is changing everything. But, you know, most humans, after they finish their schooling, don't have an opportunity to very easily change their brains. But there is another...
Speaking as a brain scientist.
Yes, I'm a neuroscientist. So how many people here have taken a MOOC, massively open online course? Okay. So, you know, it was thought that this is going to revolutionize education in terms of colleges and schools. Well, I started my own MOOC. This was about a year ago with Barbara Oakley. And we now have around over 1 million learners over the last year, which is the biggest MOOC at Coursera. And what I discovered was that it's not going to revolutionize colleges or high schools, because the big demographic is 25 to 35. So these are people who have finished their college education. But by the way, half the people have college or higher education who are taking the MOOC. But these are people who are out of school discovering that they don't have the skills they need to survive in the current digital age that we're living in. And so they're going back, and it's a lot easier to go back to the internet at night to pick up a course on Python or anything else that you need in order to do better at work. So I think that we really should think about that as a very different way to educate the population.
What is your course on, Terry?
Learning how to learn, and it uses what we know about neuroscience to help anybody who has to learn a complex subject such as mathematics to make it easier to both to learn the concepts but also to retain the knowledge.
Wow, thank you. Well, we do that. We want to make it very clear. Conversation is what we're about. We have a whole session Tuesday morning just to talk about what we've learned so far. So, and again, I hope this spirit will be evident throughout the rest of the days. I think we should get the chairs on stage, right? So what do I have to say to make that happen? Oh, good. Thank you. So maybe the panelists could come up here along with the chairs if they don't mind. Oops, did I? All right. We have an Amazon Echo up here because it's sort of a fun thing that many people haven't actually experienced. Alexa, what's the weather?
Currently, in San Francisco, it's 61 degrees with partly sunny skies. Tonight, you can look for showers and a low of 51 degrees.
Stop. Anyway, you can ask it a lot more than that, but it's a demonstration of the Internet of Things. It's a demonstration of a fundamental new technology platform, and I think it's something that everybody needs to pay attention to, and Amazon doesn't have any sponsorship relationship to us. So, okay, good. So here we are. Thank you. So we're going to start with, the main event conceptually here, human values, and I'm very pleased to have this really interesting and distinguished group of people to talk about values. All three of them are living them out in their work. Let me just briefly introduce them from your right to left. Reverend Michael McFarland, who is a Jesuit, who is former president of the College of the Holy Cross. He was also a computer scientist who has a PhD in computer science from Carnegie Mellon, which he went back and got as a Jesuit, interestingly. And I want to ask him how that all fit together in a minute. And he has done a lot of work in computer ethics. He's currently in a position of leadership in the Jesuits in the Northeast United States. Next to him is Erica Koshy, who is the executive director on innovation at UNICEF Innovation, and so she works in UNICEF doing technology, and she's doing some really interesting things. And finally, Julie Hanna, who is a good friend of mine and who I'm very pleased was willing to do this relatively last minute, who is currently the presidential ambassador for global entrepreneurship and has been spending a lot of time with the president and also Secretary Pritzker, who'll be here in the morning. Last time I looked at Secretary Pritzker's Twitter page, there was a picture of the president with his arm around Julie on Secretary Pritzker's Twitter homepage, which I thought was great. She's also executive chair of the board of Kiva. She's been a serial entrepreneur in both for-profit and non-profit organizations. So I really don't know who to start with. What was I had sort of a basic idea. I think I want to start with you, Julie. I don't know why, because I know you the best. I know you'll say something that will be provocative and useful to everybody, although I have no doubt about the other two. But why did you want to be on a session on values and technology? Because you did want to be on it.
I would say it begins with the realization that I had a number of years ago, is that I believe our values and beliefs shape the kind of businesses, organizations, and products that we create. And I didn't quite understand how true that was until I began to connect the dots on my own life in hindsight. As Steve Jobs said, you can only connect the dots on your life in hindsight. And I realized that, you know, I had self-identified as a Silicon Valley entrepreneur. That's how people knew me, but that my life began in a very different place. I'm an Egyptian immigrant. I was a refugee of war, and those experiences going from the front lines of war to the front lines of the tech revolution had really shaped my value system. And I began to think about how, without even my having a conscious awareness, what the red thread in everything that I'd done and all the products I'd built and the companies that I had helped build. And it was really based on a fundamental belief that the greatest form of justice is fair access. And because as a child coming to the States, I watched my parents struggle, not able to get jobs. We didn't have a steady place to live. They were educated and resourceful, but they couldn't get access. And I saw how that began chipping away at my family's dignity. And I came to realize that circumstances beyond our control can shape our own identity, and that they can become a permanent part of our psyche. And so that, in me, created a sense of wanting to, I dreamt about helping create a world that recognized dignity as a human right, that recognizes that talent is universal, but opportunity isn't. A world that understands that the opposite of poverty isn't wealth, but rather justice, and that fair access is a cornerstone of justice. And those were the things that were kind of the red thread in what I began working in. And technology to me became a democratizing force. So when I studied computer science and I was trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life, I began seeing it as a way of leveling the playing field, as a way of enabling the kind of access that my family hadn't gotten.
Do you think it is?
It is, and yet I think what's important to do is to tease apart the potential from the reality. So we have this potential for greater access that we've seen play out in certain parts of the world, and yet alongside that potential, there's greater inequity. We have the hollowing out of the middle class. We have, terms like, instead of haves and have-nots, we've got have-it-alls and everyone else. Half the world lives on less than $2 a day. Most of those people are micro-entrepreneurs. They don't have access. And so it has that potential, but our values and beliefs and our intentions shape how we direct the power of technology to solve kind of humanity's greatest challenges. So that's why I want to be on this panel.
So Michael, as a computer scientist who is in the religion business, so to speak, how do you feel about that and what Julie just said? Or are you worried about values as they are expressed in our modern technology?
I am, and I completely agree with Julie that two essential elements here are human dignity and justice. I think it's important to think about the person, the human individual, and how technology impacts them. But we also have to see them in the larger social context, which is easy to miss, I think, especially as Americans. And in the West, we tend to center on the individual. But we have to realize that people, to be fully human, live a very complex social life. Not only their individual one-on-one relationships, but the institutions within which they live, which provide a context for them, nourish them, challenge them, help them grow, and help them to function. So we need to see that aspect of it. And so we have to ask ourselves, where is the justice in the way technology is developed and used? Who's excluded? Who are the voices that are not heard when we develop technology? What assumptions are embedded in our technology? For example, if you develop workplace technology where the assumption is our goal is to create greater efficiency and greater productivity, and you don't think about the impact on the workers, you will develop one type of technology, and that will have very powerful impact on workers, and sometimes really devastating impact. On the other hand, if you start with the experience of the worker and say, how can we enhance that experience? How can we empower that person? How can we help him or her enrich his work life and the contribution that he or she can make? Then you develop often a very different technology, and it has very different implications. You could talk about that in relation to education. If you see education as pushing information out and doing it as efficiently as possible, sometimes that's all people are looking for, but you can undermine the important formative dimension of education, where the person is formed as an individual and as a social being. And you develop the technology very differently. So technology embeds our values and our assumptions, and if we're not critical about those assumptions, and also if we can't get out of our own point of view as technologists, which can be narrow in some ways, then it can have a very deleterious effect, I think.
So Erica, how are we doing on asking those questions? And how do you ask them at UNICEF, and how do you assess how the technology industry is doing with that?
So when we started developing technology for our programs on the ground at UNICEF, this was about 7 years ago, there was no real technology solution out there that met any of our needs. And so I think that gives a good indication that, that the people who are developing technology were not developing them for the poorest of the poor, clearly, because there was nothing matched. The only sort of common denominator that we could find was a text message. Because even on the most basic phone, you have the ability to send a text and make a phone call. But smartphones, they were not really available, still not very available, increasingly so, but not yet. And a lot of the content that was also being developed was so high bandwidth that it was completely inaccessible based on the device, or even if there was a smart device, based on the data plan that you would need to have it. So I think it's very clear that technology is not developed for those who probably need it the most. So the approach we take is we hack things together. And we use what's out there. We try to do the heavy lifting in the cloud. But essentially, we've had to build our own technology solutions for the places that we work in, because they don't exist. And so I think a good example of that is a program that we have that's called UReport. And UReport, like you report. And young people, it's now in 18 countries, can sign up using a text message. They send the word join to a short code. And then they become UReporters. And they're asked one question every week about what's happening in their community, their views on certain things. So an example I was giving earlier was a couple weeks ago in Liberia, where we have 17,000 UReporters. We sent out a text message asking young people if they were trading sex for grades, because we had heard that this was an issue in the country, but we didn't really know. And what we heard back overwhelmingly was that 86% of young people said that yes, it was a problem. So clearly, I mean, terrible.
In their school, they were aware of it happening.
They were aware of it happening. And so we immediately used this information to, set up an emergency task force, to set up a hotline, to try to respond and deal with this huge, huge problem in the country. But we had to build that system called UReport, which runs on a platform called Rapid Pro, ourselves, because we couldn't use Facebook for it because of the privacy issues. We couldn't use, and then no one had access to Facebook because they didn't have smartphones. And they didn't have the data plan to use it either. We couldn't use Twitter because it wasn't widely used there. The lowest common denominator we could find was a text message. And I think that if you look at other products out there, for example, even the Android operating system, which is probably the most widely used operating system out there on the smartphone market, it's built for a data plan. Like your apps, they're constantly running in the background, pulling down information. It's not built for people who are living on less than $2 a day And every single thing that they own, they buy things in small packages. If you've seen, soap is sold in individual packages because that's what you can afford on the day that you buy it. You can't afford a monthly plan, or you can't even afford a big thing of soap. So I think we need to think about, if we are going to build products and services for people who are not us, right, and who are not privileged to be sitting here and talking about these things, we really need to think about it from the user's point of view and the products and services that they need to sort of help their lives, but I'll also allow them to lift themselves out of poverty.
Erica, surely that's very relevant to nonprofits, but we have companies that they have to make money. How do you reconcile your mindset on this with that reality? And what do you think that should be the mindset of companies that are in business to generate a profit, but that want to partake of this world that you're describing?
I would argue that you can do both. I think a really good example of it is M-Pesa, which is all throughout East Africa. It's a very commonly used example. But one thing people don't necessarily know about it is that it's a mobile money service. 42% of Kenya's GDP flows through that service on a daily basis.
Kenya, yeah.
In Kenya. And they take anywhere from a 2% to 50% cut of the transaction, depending on how small or large of it is. So clearly, they're making money. And I think other spaces that are really ripe for disruption where businesses can make money and also do a tremendous amount of good are the transportation sector on the technology side, the wearables and sensor sector, the learning and education sector, and obviously the financial services sector.
I think you were going to say the thing you said to me at the reception before about how companies ought to be.
Yeah, I really think that their core business needs to be completely aligned with the corporate social responsibility. It shouldn't be something that you do on the side. It should be the products and services that you develop should be providing social good. There's many different ways you can partner with, whether the public sector, other companies, local social enterprises, I think, to make that happen.
Julie, you're a serial entrepreneur and a business person, among your other things you've done. Is that easily done? I mean, is that a reasonable way to think about it?
Yeah, I think it's interesting you're asking the question because in a way it is symptomatic of the fact that we've somehow found ourselves in a place where we have created a false choice between purpose and profit or between mission and business. We kind of have this dualistic mindset that when we think about purpose or bettering the world, we think through sort of a charity lens. When we think about business, we think through a profit maximization, kind of hyper profit maximization lens. And that is not necessary, and it hasn't always been that way. And the Silicon Valley I came to 22 years ago, there's always been this mission-driven ethos. We often talk about mission and mercenary-driven cultures in Silicon Valley. And mission-driven, we know both can be financially successful. We also recognize that mission-driven cultures tend to be better places to work. They engender a greater sense of loyalty amongst employees and customers. They make us passionate about their products, and they often become enduring institutions and society's exemplars. And the greatest entrepreneurs in tech are very mission-driven. So I think that sometimes we forget that Larry and Sergey's goal was to organize the world's information, connecting every human being on the planet. These are kind of mission purpose-driven. If you look at the half of the world that I mentioned earlier lives on less than $2 a day, if you look at it through a market lens, you could say this is the world's largest underserved market. And there's a massive economy there. You go to the Kibera slum in Kenya, which is the largest slum in all of Africa, and it is a hyper-networked environment where there's tremendous amount of commerce happening very efficiently. So I think we created this false choice. It doesn't have to be that way.
And Michael, I want to hear from you in a second, but when we talked on the phone, we're talking about unconscious ethnocentric bias, right? You're being much kinder to the industry here than you were on the phone. Talk about that.
Well, I think I'll start with something that Jessie said in her 90 seconds, which I was really heartened to hear. I often think about if there was one key to success, whether it's building the world's best products, businesses, changing the world, it's a deep, radical practice of empathy, radical empathy. Because when you exercise that, you go deeply into climbing into someone else's head and you look at the world through their eyes. So when we sit in Silicon Valley, one of the things that we're at risk of having happen, that does happen now, is we begin thinking about our own problems in the bubble of privilege that we are in, and we solve for those, and we keep solving for them. Or we think about solving for the globe, but through our own lens. And so it's very important to find ways to pop out of that bubble and to exercise radical empathy. The hybridization of knowledge and experience and the diversity of entrepreneurship is critical to this, because if we want to have, I think entrepreneurs are the world's greatest change agents. Being an entrepreneur is fundamentally, it's a mindset about creating a future you want to live in. If we want a future that represents the diversity of the planet, then we would do well to ignite as diverse of a population as possible around entrepreneurship. Smart people with deep values and highly varied backgrounds. I think that's the best way to inoculate, if you will, against this ethnocentricity that may be happening unconsciously.
And really quickly, in your ambassadorship, you're doing that on a global scale? Is that what you're trying to do? Sort of help stimulate the idea of entrepreneurship everywhere as much as possible? Okay. I want to get to Michael, but I just wanted to make sure that you nodded there. How is the business community and the tech industry doing on this empathy thing, Michael?
Well, I think that what's happened right now is we've become a shareholder-driven culture and economy almost exclusively. And I think we have to think about who are all the stakeholders in a business. Customers, the workers, all those who are affected by what the business does, and those who are excluded from the business activity, and the larger community. People reject this, but businesses can't function without the infrastructure that's created by the country, by the communities they're in, by the educational system. I mean, there are a lot of people that contribute to the success of a business beyond the shareholders who invest their capital there. And yet, there's not enough attention paid to paying back those people who have given so much to make that work. When I was just getting out of graduate school, I was privileged to work at Bell Laboratories back in its heyday in the 80s and 90s, where some of the great minds in the world were working, and which had given our world so many great technologies. Well, that existed because AT&T was a utility. It made money, but it was protected in some ways by the government. And it was just expected that it would invest a certain amount of its income back in the community. And you saw it at a corporate level, but you also saw it in individuals. They had the pioneer groups who did service in the community. It was the whole culture was about giving back. And that's what allowed us.
Because they took so much, though. I mean,
they had guaranteed income, right? And our phone rates are certainly lower because they're not a utility. But where do you find the balance there, where it's recognized that other stakeholders matter?
And I want to hear Eric on this too. But I want to understand the pragmatic way to interpret this, because you're saying we should do this, but I remember when we were on the phone, you asserted to me the Pope is not a communist. Without me questioning that, by the way, you brought it up. But the bottom line, I believe, is that you believe that it's actually for business's best interest. I mean, it's not just like, this is the thing I think we need to get this conversation toward, is it's not just about like, oh yeah, we're going to be nice people, right? It's about, if we don't do this, what do you worry is going to happen? And then Eric, I'd like you to ask the same question.
To go back to my example of AT&T, I worry a lot, especially as an educator, about our failure to invest in long-term research and development. I mean, back when I was in grad school, not only the government was investing through DARPA and Office of Naval Research and the National Science Foundation, but you had places like IBM, AT&T, and then later Fujitsu had labs that were just there to develop technology. They were always interested in technology.
You're one of the few people that remembers Fujitsu had it. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
we don't talk about that too often.
Yeah, they had one in Princeton that was pretty good, and I think they were at Berkeley also. So I don't see that happening. I mean, people want to know that there'll be a product coming out of this a year from now, and I mean, you see Google, I think, right now is doing some of that, but they keep repurposing and drawing back in too. And I know their shareholders are after them not to do some of these visionary projects. So I think we have to change the culture about how we think about business and what it means to be successful. I mean, does it just mean making your next quarter targets on profits and revenue? I think it's a lot more than that.
To give Google credit, I don't think they're letting those shareholders stop them from doing a lot of pretty wild stuff. And
Right.
Erica, you actually said something positive about Google also. Could you want to, I mean, anything you want to say is interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think their ethos is the right one, much more so than many other companies out there. But I think that if the private sector sort of, and I say this as a blanket whole, not necessarily startups that don't have the capital, but especially the established private sector, doesn't start thinking about developing products and services that have sort of empathy at the core of them, or for people who are not sitting in this room, I think that they're going to lose out very quickly. We're seeing, if you just look at the demographics over the next 15 years, basically all countries that we know as sort of rich countries are shrinking in population. Like the average age in Germany is 48. In Nigeria, it's 18. We're going to see huge growth in Africa in terms of population and in Asia as well. We're also going to see a shift of power to the east and to the south. More than half of the middle class in 15 years will be in Asia. And if you look at sort of the middle class in the US and in Europe and in Japan, it'll be a much smaller proportion. So when you think about where your next customer is, if you want to be around as a business in 10 years, you better be thinking towards developing products and services that are relevant for your next customer. And the products and services we have today are not at all.
Okay, who wants to jump into this conversation from the audience, either with a comment or a question? Anybody want to, are there burning desire to say something? I don't, got to put my hand in front of my eyes. No, nobody's got anything that they're shocked about and they want to challenge or echo. The thing that I was thinking about as you were just talking was the comment about China that Rowan made. And I do believe that, a country led by PhD engineers, although the current head of state is not a PhD engineer, but he's the first one that wasn't. And there's still, most of the leaders are. And they understand how this stuff works, and we don't, basically, at the governmental level. And that's, I think, and I thought this was where you were going, by the way, that, it's funny, even the Wall Street Journal had a piece over the weekend, or like, was it Friday or Saturday, about, declining faith in capitalism, right? If business wants to continue to be the engine of growth in society, which we celebrate, and we even say it in our first page of our magazine, that's what we believe at Techonomy, they're going to have to actually do a little bit better job, right? I mean, somebody else pick up on that.
I think people will demand it
Yeah.
as more, and especially as the sort of influence of the state or the public sector as we know it wanes, which I think we are seeing, and sort of there's definitely a rise in sort of the corporate strength, and more of your data is with these corporations. I think people will start to, I hope people will start to demand more of these companies because of their strength and their influence in your lives.
I had a very interesting conversation with the CEO of Kickstarter a few days ago, and Kickstarter, I think, famously changed their structure to B Corp structure.
Just recently, yeah.
Just recently, and it was very interesting to hear, kind of get inside what motivated that. And I think he's represented.
B Corp being a company that has dual purpose, not just to make money, but also to serve the community.
Yes. And one of the drivers was around this desire to recognize that you have stakeholders beyond just shareholders, that at the deepest kind of value they wanted to be in integrity with is being in service to stakeholders and the community and all constituents. And his frame was interesting because I think he's representative of sort of a growing sentiment that we have an economic system that creates almost sort of a lottery ticket kind of mindset around big exits and the unicorn obsession, and determining value creation, assuming value creation is synonymous with valuation. And we've somehow, we're starting to talk about those kind of almost interchangeably and teasing them apart and kind of saying, actually, you want to get off this ride. We want to create something of kind of enduring, lasting value. We want to be profitable. We will share in those profits equitably. But we want to get off of this ride with a lottery ticket sort of chase game around valuation and being only focused on shareholders. And I think there's a growing sentiment around kind of how we think about the model of capitalism that we're exercising, which is, in a way, it's sort of a money creating, chasing more money model, very much about growth and where does this kind of end eventually. So I think there's an interesting conversation that's starting to emerge.
Another interesting statistic in this Wall Street Journal article, was a series of statistics created by, Simone's here, Legatum. I don't know if she's here. The research was done by Legatum about surveying people in countries around the world about their expectation that their next generation would be happier, healthier, and wealthier. And the number went down by the development of the country. The least developed countries, I think India was where it was the highest level of optimism, and the US was the lowest. Only 14% of Americans said they think the next generation will live a better life than they do. And the article was pointing out, it's arguably not true. I mean, we're already, at a massive level, the world is living better right now. I think that's demonstrable and measurable. But the faith in that is so low in our society. Anybody in the audience? Okay, and then we'll go to you. And I want to ask you one question before we end it, for sure. Go ahead. The mic's coming to you right now. Thank you very much for the mic handling.
I'm John from Hyundai Motors. In this discussion about human values, and I know that we're looking at the underserved communities, but we don't look that very far. And Dave, in your opening comments that there's sexting going on in U.S. high school, I think is also part of the story too. That's indicative of how we're not protecting the youngest of our country here today, let alone those in the developing world. And I also question, are we shocked by that news? Are we shamed? Do we feel distraught, embarrassed by that kind of thing happening? And I think to the extent that we ought to feel ashamed and embarrassed by that happening, and we ought to think about how we ought to, can make a difference, even here in the U.S.
Thank you. Interesting comment. Over here. Can we get the mic here? And then let's get a few more voices on the floor. We've got only 3 minutes and 34 seconds, but we'll do it fast.
Thanks. Arjuna Costa from the Omidyar Network. Quick question for the panelists. The millennial generation thinks about their careers very differently from the generation before that. Purpose becomes so much more central. It didn't come up in the conversation. I'd be curious as to what the panelists think about that and what that implies for the future of sort of corporate development.
I think of it as the self-correcting mechanism that humanity has built in a way. I mean, I think the millennial generation has sort of looked at the model of success that their parents grew up with, and they kind of said, if that's your idea of success, you don't look very happy. We want to kind of create a more purposeful existence. And so the statistics are compelling, and I think that what Kickstarter, actually the reason I raised them as an example is they are representative of this sort of how purpose-driven values, aligning those with business. There's a search for doing that amongst millennials. So it gives me great hope, because the question about purpose and meaning comes up very early in the context of business when you talk to millennials.
It is funny, though, they used to say that was true of the baby boomers back in the day. It seemed not to play out. Was there somebody over there? Okay, why did you people not have your hands up before? Okay, this person, and then we'll get to you, and then I saw a hand over here somewhere, too. And maybe we should just get a bunch of voices out, and then we'll have a response from here.
Hey guys, I'm Brooks Bell. About kind of the issues with having multiple stakeholders and not optimizing to any of them besides the shareholder. I was just thinking about the role of data in all of this. I think to some degree, there is incredible proliferation of data that we're managing our businesses to, and the easiest things to measure are the short-term metrics of revenue and profit. And so, of course, you optimize towards those measurements. I think as we get more data, the more short-term focused we become. And I think that's driving some of these issues. I think data is also the solution to these issues as we become a lot more sophisticated and use data to more in predicting long-term value and changing the metrics that we're measuring against, metrics that are a lot more difficult to measure. I think that will be a really important solution out of this situation that we're in.
Very interesting. Okay, well, let's try to be as fast as we can with all these, please.
So I have a question here about the...
Identify yourself, sorry.
My name is Yatish Rajawat.
Yatish, oh, hi.
Hi. I run a citizen engagement platform in India. And I was very interested in this comment about the shareholder economy, because, we feel that somehow the shareholder economy actually makes a lot of policy decision of government geared towards capitalization of few individuals' wealth. So that determines a lot of things that not only companies do, but a lot of things that government does. But this is easily solved by media, by stopping a Fortune 500 list based on revenues and market capitalization to different metrics. It can be easily changed by policy, financial policy, or like in India, it's been done that a portion of profits needs to be transferred to a fund by every company, and 2% of the funds from the profit have to be transferred. It can also be done by who do we look as heroes. There is this myth and that the unicorn, the guys who create unicorns are the heroes. They are the leaders. And I fail to understand this thing about leadership being linked to the amount of wealth that guy has created or the amount of flip that he has done. So my question was that, especially to Julie, that, is there a policy decision here which can be exercised to change this mindset itself?
Okay, really fast.
Oh.
Policy, laws, funds.
Yes.
Forcing companies to do the right thing, in effect. It's more of an Indian idea than an American one, I would say. But anyway.
There is obviously an interaction between policy and business practices, and I think that the part of the challenge here in the U.S. is we believe in the system that we've constructed, and I think policy changes to change the will to change that becomes very tricky and difficult. So I tend to say policy follows innovation. That's the entrepreneur.
Okay, Jody, real fast.
Jody Westby. So I